Hi everyone, welcome back to Beautiful British English. Today's lesson is all about how to start thinking in English. So thinking in English rather than thinking in your native language and then having to translate into English, which can take a long time for some people. Okay, so welcome back. So in today's lesson, I want to share with you some ideas on how you can start or increase how you think in the English language. Now, thinking or being able to think in the language that you want to communicate in is a fluency skill, because if you can't think in English and you have to think in your native language first, then you have to translate in your head, and then you have to sort of think about how you rearrange all the words into English properly and then speak. Now, although that process may only take a matter of, say, seconds or minutes, it does alter the flow of the fluency, the flow of the conversation, and how fluent you are with the language. So being able to think in English is a key fluency skill. Okay. Before we start talking about thinking in English though, I just want to talk about translating for a few minutes. The reason I want to talk about translating is because translating from one language to another isn't always a bad thing, particularly if the languages have lots and lots of similarities. Now, for example, two groups of languages, German and English. Now, the German and English languages, they are different, but they do also have lots of similarities. Yeah, in terms of vocabulary, grammatical structures, there are some vast differences, but there are some similarities, which does make translating from one language into another simpler and easier. The same can be said for Italian and Spanish. Now, I live in Italy. I have lived in Italy for about 15 years. I am not fluent in Italian, but I do speak Italian. And it's strange sometimes because I can actually understand Spanish as well. I have never learnt or studied or practiced Spanish, but I can understand Spanish because these languages are very, very similar. They are both Latin based, so the grammatical structures are very similar. The verbs are very similar. Yeah, there are so many similarities between these languages that, you know, Spanish speakers can understand Italian, Italian speakers can understand Spanish very, very easily. So translating between these two languages is a very easy, simple and quick process. On the other hand, translating from Italian into English or English into Italian is a very, very complex process because the languages are so different. Yeah? Okay, so before I give you an example, I want to give you my first tip. And my first tip is, no matter what your current level of English is, and no matter how good you are right now at thinking in English, if you want to get better, I want you to start with just keeping it simple. Okay? So I want to give you a strategy to help you to become more fluent in English by thinking. Okay, so it's a strategy, and any kind of strategy or any kind of skill that you want to learn and improve does require lots of practice and lots of consistency. Yeah, so you have to practice regularly and you have to do it consistently. And I want you guys to keep it simple to start with. Okay, so keep it simple, keep it short, and just stick to what you think is most important first of all. For example, okay, let's go from Italian to English. So if I wanted to say in Italian, today I have to work. Okay, oggi io devo lavorare. Oggi io devo lavorare. Today I have to work. Now, today I have to work. From that sentence, from that simple sentence, we can identify what are perhaps the most important elements to help us communicate. And today I have to work. Today, the time period, I is identifying me and work is identifying the activity. So today I work. So if the only thing that you can think in your head are these three simple words in English, then use them. Today I work. Focus on your ability to communicate rather than focusing on your ability to communicate perfect English. Fluency does not require you to have perfect English. It requires you to have great communication skills. Today I work. These three simple words impart all the information that you need to get started communicating. If it's difficult for you to think in English, then it will be difficult for you to talk in English. So thinking, or being able to think in the language that you're learning, is a skill that you should start to learn at the very, very beginning. Don't wait. Start learning how to think in English when you start learning English. Right at the very beginning. Okay. Now, if you've already started to learn English, but you haven't started learning to think in English, that's okay. But let's just start with our simple strategy. Okay, so for learning anything, you do need a strategy and you need consistency. So you need to do this regularly. And I'm going to suggest spending 5 minutes each day thinking in English will, over many, many weeks and months, really help you to improve your fluency skills. So step number 1, which we looked at previously, was keep it simple, simplify what you want to say, and just focus on communication. So in your head, just think about the simplest way to say what you want to say. Think it in the most simple way, and then say it in the most simple way. That's step number 1. That's what you should be doing right at the very beginning. Step number 2, okay, you have to start somewhere. So we have to start with what we know. Yeah? You have to start with what you know. Now, to start with what you know, you actually need to know what you don't know, if you understand. So what I would like you guys to do is spend a few minutes wherever you are right now, unless you're driving. If you're driving, you can't do this perhaps, but most of the places, I would like you to sort of just take a few minutes to look around the room where you are now and think in your head, do you know the name of every object that you can see? Yeah, try it. Just spend a few minutes, pause this video, just spend a few minutes just looking around the room, look at everything, and in your head ask yourself, do you know the name of this object in English? Now, if you don't know the name of something that's in the room where you are now in English, then you need to find out the name of that thing. Yeah? Start with what you know. So that is a little exercise that you can do anywhere, almost anywhere. You can be on the bus, on the train, you could be in a very boring business meeting or presentation. And, you know, instead of just playing on your phone, you could just spend 5 minutes looking around the room and thinking to yourself, do I know the name for everything that I can see in English? Yeah? Do that for 5 minutes every day, and I guarantee that you will improve your knowledge of English in general, but you'll also start training your brain to be thinking in English. So, nouns. The next step is verbs. You probably know lots of verbs, but there are probably lots of verbs that you don't know. Now, the most common verbs in any language are probably the same. Or rather, the most common verbs that you want to use or will need to use in English are probably the same verbs that you use in your current language. Yeah? So whether you're talking about work or your hobbies or movies or whatever, the verbs that you need are going to be the same verbs. So Another thing that you can do almost every day is whenever you find yourself performing a task, and it could be any task, okay, could be anything, yeah, it could be at work, could be at home. Ask yourself, what am I doing? Yeah, what am I doing? What do I call this thing that I'm doing in my own language? And then think to yourself, well, what's the correct verb in English? Now you could be driving, you could be running, you could be skiing, yeah, you could be writing, you could be doing anything, but check whatever activity you are doing throughout the day and just ask yourself, what is this called in English? So we've got nouns, verbs. Then I want you to start moving on to simple sentences. And again, this is not speaking, you're just doing all of this in your head. When you have a lot of nouns and you have a lot of verbs, okay, you want to start thinking about simple sentences in your head. So for example, okay, right now, while I'm performing this task, I might be thinking, I am writing. While I was writing, I was thinking and saying in my head, I am writing. Yeah, a very, very simple sentence. I am writing. So there are 3 very, very simple steps that you can take to start the process of learning how to think in English. But there are more techniques that I want to share with you. Here are some tips of things that you can do that will help you to think and practice a little bit of English thinking every day. Number 1, start planning your schedule and your daily activities in English. Whether you have a written diary with all of your scheduling or it's on your computer or your smartphone, start planning what you're doing in English. Yeah? Now, we all have smartphones and we all have lots of applications on our smartphones. Change the language of your smartphone, all of your applications, even the language of your computer, your laptop, any device that you have, change the language to English. Your car, if you have a modern car with a computerized dashboard, change your car to English so that it only communicates with you in English and it forces you to think in English. We all use Google many, many times each day. So next time you go to Google, instead of doing a Google search in your native language, Google in English. That will help you to think in English. Finally, I want to suggest that the next time you have to learn a new skill, a new task, or a new concept, learn in English rather than in your native language. And if you do all of these things or any combination of these things every day, that will help your brain to start thinking in English. Okay, now I have just one more tip that I want to share with you. And this is quite an advanced tip, but it is something that I think will really, really help. And this is to have conversations with yourself. Yes, I mean with yourself. There's nobody else involved. Just have a conversation with yourself in English. Now, you can do this conversation out loud, speaking, or you can have this conversation purely in your mind. And the conversation can be about anything. It could be about what your schedule is for tomorrow. It could be about what you wish to learn in English. It could be asking yourself something that you are going to Google. Have a conversation in your mind in English. It doesn't have to be a complex conversation. Just ask a question, answer the question. Ask another question, answer another question. Just spend a couple of minutes in your mind having a conversation with yourself in English. Yeah? Try and do it every day, just for a few minutes. And if you do any or all of these things that I've suggested to you today, over many, many weeks and months, and please, this is not something that is going to improve just like that. This like any skill, requires practice and consistency for you to improve. So it will take many weeks and perhaps many months, but if you are consistent and you try and do this every day, if you can, you will, in the end, be able to think more in English.